My Lord and my God, I firmly believe that you are here, that you see me, that you hear me. I adore you with profound reverence. I ask your pardon for my sins and the grace to make this time of prayer fruitful. My Immaculate Mother, Saint Joseph, my Father and Lord, my guardian angel, intercede for me. Today we celebrate a feast of our Mother Mary, the feast of Our Lady of Lourdes. And we recall with gratitude the apparitions of our Mother Mary to a young 14-year-old girl from France named Bernadette. Bernadette was the oldest of a large, poor family, and one day with her sister and a friend, they went out to look for firewood. And they had to cross a little canal that flowed in the river, and on the other side of the river there was a grotto with an oval recess hollowed out of the rock. And there were many bushes there and dry twigs and branches, so it was perfect for kindling and for making a fire. And so as they were approaching, Saint Bernadette says, "Soon I heard a strange noise, like a gust of wind. I turned towards the meadow and noticed that the trees were not moving. I looked at the grotto and saw a lady dressed in white, with a sky-blue sash, and on each of her feet a yellow rose of the same color as the chain of her rosary. I thought I was seeing things and rubbed my eyes. I put my hand into my pocket to get my rosary. I wanted to make the sign of the cross, but I couldn't lift my hand to my forehead. When the lady made the sign of the cross, I also tried. Though my hand was trembling, this time I succeeded. I began to pray the rosary while the lady slipped the beads through her fingers, but without moving her lips. After the rosary had finished, the vision disappeared." Mary appeared to Saint Bernadette, and to her alone. The other people could not see her. She appeared to her 18 times. In February, March, April, and July of 1858. Mary didn't speak to Saint Bernadette until the third appearance. She said, "I do not promise to make you happy in this world, but in the next." And in the 8th apparition, she said, "Penance, penance, penance. Pray for the conversion of sinners." She also told her that a chapel ought to be built in her honor. The impact of Mary's apparitions to Saint Bernadette have been tremendous on the entire world. The millions of pilgrims who have gone to Lourdes, many of whom have been healed of their physical illness thanks to the water from the stream that flows there, a stream that Bernadette discovers after Mary instructs her to dig in the ground. And most importantly, the many, many conversions that have taken place. Decisions to follow you, Jesus, more closely, to grow in one's relationship with God and with the Virgin Mary. We are witnesses of the huge devotion to Our Lady of Lourdes throughout the whole world. Many parishes carry that title of Our Lady. My home parish, in fact. Many places have built grottos similar to that of Lourdes. There's one in the Vatican. There's one at the University of Notre Dame in Indiana. And countless parishes and schools. The impact has been tremendous. That impact being, most importantly, a close relationship with you, Jesus, and with your mother. And Jesus and Mary, you chose to use Saint Bernadette, a poor girl, not very well educated, and not extremely bright either, apparently. At least her catechism teacher said, Bernadette has difficulties retaining the words in the catechism, and she can't study it because she has not learned how to read. However, she does apply enormous effort to try to comprehend the meaning of the explanations. She is very attentive, and most especially, she is very pious and modest. Pious and modest. We also want to imitate Saint Bernadette by being humble, because we see Jesus, and we can address ourselves to Mary too. You have a very interesting way of working. God has a remarkable way of revealing himself. He doesn't usually go to the powerful, to the politicians, or even the ecclesiastical authorities. More often than not, he goes to the humble, the poor in spirit, oftentimes the materially poor, but most importantly, the poor in spirit. He goes to children. He used Saint Joseph, who was a carpenter. He used Mary, the Virgin Mary, a young woman in a small town in a part of the world that had been conquered by the Roman Empire. He uses the shepherds who are told about Jesus' birth by angels sent by God. He uses 3 poor children at Fatima, and Mary appears to them many times, giving them very important messages about penance and the need for praying the rosary, very similar to the message at Lourdes. Mary appeared to St. Juan Diego in Mexico. And Jesus chose the apostles. Many of them were simply fishermen. And of course, in the Gospels, we see their defects. They're far from perfect. Jesus and Mary, you chose Saint Bernadette. And you also choose me. And you choose those who are listening to this podcast, those who are trying to talk to you in these 10 minutes with you, Jesus. We don't have to have big-time connections to have an impact. Well, if we do have big-time connections, well, that's great. God wants us to be humble instruments of his. Recently, I was at a funeral for a man who'd been a literature teacher for many years. He was 95 years old. He had 9 children, many grandchildren, and even great-grandchildren. And raising his 9 children with his wife, they barely got by. They did, but barely, because of his modest income. And the impact he had was tremendous. And Jesus, we give you thanks for the impact of this man, the impact of all those that we mentioned earlier too. The impact that this literature teacher had on his students, first and foremost on his family. It was very striking to see at the reception after the burial. There was an open mic, right? An opportunity for anyone to go up to the microphone and tell their stories about him. And there were children and grandchildren and friends. And one common theme was the impact that he had had on their faith life. What did Saint Bernadette, this literature teacher, the apostles, and everybody else that we have mentioned, and all the saints, what do they have in common? They loved God and they wanted what he wanted. So how do we figure out what God is asking me to do? Daily prayer, daily conversation with you, Jesus. Being in the state of grace, thanks to the sacrament of confession, and also regular reception of communion. Doing my task every day and seeing those tasks as if they were from God, because actually they are. And then trusting. Trusting in God, whether we see the impact or not, it will be big. And if we just impact one person to help them turn to Christ, that is big. Each soul is worth all of the blood of Christ. So we ask Saint Bernadette to intercede for us. And Mary, Our Lady of Lourdes, we love you, and we ask you to help us want to be useful instruments in the hands of your Son, Jesus Christ. I thank you, my God, for the good resolutions, affections, and inspirations that you have communicated to me in this meditation. I ask your help to put them into effect. My Immaculate Mother, Saint Joseph, my Father and Lord, my guardian angel, intercede for me.